Grace woke to the smell of smoke. At first, she thought she was dreaming, that faint bitter scent curling into her nostrils, the kind that sometimes drifted in from a neighbor's chimney. But when she opened her eyes, the haze wasn't outside her window. It was in her room. She coughed, sat up, and the air clawed at her throat. The smoke alarm should have been screaming. It was silent. The curtains glowed faint orange, edges folding in on themselves like paper flowers turning to ash. "Dear God," she whispered. Barefoot, she stumbled into the hallway. The walls were breathing heat. Every sound became distant, the crackle, the low roar, the popping of glass somewhere behind her. Grace grabbed her purse from the dresser, the one thing she could think of. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the framed photo of Robert on the nightstand, her late husband smiling in a gray suit. She hesitated. The frame was already too hot to touch. The smoke thickened. Her eyes streamed. She dropped to her knees, crawling toward the back door. The floorboards burned through the fabric of her nightgown. She pushed the door open and fell out onto the cold grass. Air. Sharp, clean, freezing air. Behind her, the house groaned, a deep, sorrowful sound as the roof collapsed inward. The porch light flickered once and vanished. Neighbors were shouting now. Someone was calling her name. She couldn't answer. Her throat was raw. A firefighter ran past, a blur of yellow and black, shouting orders into the night. Grace could only watch. Her home, the kitchen where she'd taught David to bake cookies, the bedroom where she and Robert had whispered their goodnights, vanished into an orange storm. The fire ate everything. It didn't care about memories or love letters or the quilt her mother had stitched by hand. When the flames finally softened to smoke, the cold hit her. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering beneath the flashing red lights. The fire chief crouched beside her. "Ma'am, do you have somewhere to go tonight?" Her lips parted, but no words came. The truth pressed like a stone in her chest. Robert was gone. Her friends had moved away. There was only one person left. She closed her eyes, the glow of her burning house still searing behind her lids. "I'll go to my son," she whispered. And the night swallowed the rest. The rain began halfway through the drive. It drummed against the cracked windshield of Grace's old sedan, blurring the road into silver streaks. The heater wheezed weakly, blowing out cold air. She gripped the steering wheel tight, her knuckles pale, her thoughts louder than the storm. "He'll understand," she told herself. Asterisk, he's my son. He'll take me in, just for a little while. Asterisk. The dashboard clock blinked 2:14 a.m. By the time she turned onto David Street, the fire smell still clung to her clothes, faint but constant, like shame that wouldn't wash away. The houses here were neat and identical, trimmed lawns, bright porch lights, quiet comfort. She parked by the curb, sat for a long moment, then stepped out. The rain soaked her hair in seconds. Her purse hung heavy with the few things she'd saved. She walked up the driveway, shoes squelching on the wet concrete, and pressed the doorbell. A light flicked on upstairs. Footsteps. Then David appeared behind the glass panel, hair tousled, eyes squinting in confusion. "Mom!" His voice cracked slightly as he opened the door. What happened to you?" Grace's lips trembled. "The house, it's gone. There was a fire. I didn't know where else to." He looked past her, at the car, at the night. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No. Just, everything burned." Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a cream-colored robe, hair perfectly brushed despite the hour. She paused, her gaze cold and sharp as the porch light behind Grace. "What's going on?" David hesitated. "It's Mom. There was a fire." Victoria's brows lifted slightly. "Now? At this hour?" Grace forced a small, hopeful smile. "I'm sorry to wake you. I just needed a place to stay, for a night or two. Until I can." Victoria descended a step, tightening the belt on her robe. The silence stretched thin. David's jaw worked as if he wanted to say yes, but fear of her answer held him still. Rain tapped on the open door. Grace's hope began to sink beneath each drop. Victoria looked at her husband, voice low but cutting clear. "David, We don't have room. The words landed like glass breaking inside her chest. Grace blinked at them both. Her son, her stranger, and the warmth of the house glowed behind them, unreachable. She stepped back into the rain. The silence after Victoria's words hung heavy in the doorway. Rain dripped from Grace's hair onto the doormat, each drop louder than anyone's breath. For a moment, David only stood there, caught between duty and discomfort. "Mom," he said finally, his voice soft, almost guilty. "Come in. Just for tonight." Grace hesitated. The warmth spilling from the house brushed her chilled skin, but she still felt like an intruder. She stepped inside, careful not to leave muddy prints on the polished floor. Victoria turned away, her robe whispering against the stairs as she climbed without another word. The sound of her footsteps, measured, deliberate, echoed in the hall. David rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding Grace's eyes. "I'll get you a blanket," he murmured. "You can take the couch." Grace nodded. "Thank you, dear." He returned with a folded quilt and a pillow. She recognized the blanket. She'd given it to him years ago, before Victoria redecorated the whole house. It smelled faintly of lavender and detergent. Too clean, too new. "I'll be fine," she said. David hesitated again, then turned toward the stairs. "Try to get some rest." When he was gone, the house seemed to exhale a sigh that wasn't quite welcome. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, filling the quiet with its judgment. Grace laid down on the couch, still wearing her coat, staring at the ceiling. Her suitcase, rescued from the trunk, sat beside her like a stray dog unsure where it belonged. Upstairs, voices began, muffled but sharp. "You can't just let her stay here, David. She's my mother. She's your problem, not mine. We have our own life now." A door closed, hard. Grace turned onto her side, clutching the edge of the quilt. The tears came silently, sliding into her hair. The old house smell, smoke and loss, still clung to her clothes, foreign in this neat perfumed space. The night stretched thin. The refrigerator hummed, a floorboard creaked, the rain softened to a whisper outside. When the first gray hint of dawn touched the blinds, Grace sat up. Her eyes were swollen, but her face calm. She folded the blanket neatly, placed it on the armrest, and lifted her suitcase. No note. No noise. Just the quiet sound of a mother leaving before the house could wake. By the time the sun rose, the driveway was empty. The diner smelled like burnt toast and loneliness. Fluorescent lights hummed above, painting everything in tired yellow. Grace sat in the corner booth, a cracked red cushion beneath her, both hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed out. The neon sign flickered open 24 hours, its reflection trembling across the window and into her drink. She stared at it as if it might offer answers. Her phone lay face up on the table, screen dim, battery blinking red. She scrolled through her contacts, thumb shaking slightly. Insurance company. Voicemail. "We're sorry, our offices are currently closed." Click. She tried again. Nothing. Next, she called Carol, her old friend from church. It rang 6 times before going silent. Grace waited, whispering to herself, *, maybe she's asleep. Maybe she'll call back. *, but the phone stayed dark, quiet, indifferent. The waitress passed by, a tired young woman with a name tag that read Lena. "You want a refill, hon?" Grace nodded weakly. "Please." The coffee hissed as it poured. The warmth reached her palms but not her heart. She glanced at the time. 4:37 a.m. The night felt endless. She tried to imagine the house as it had been. The lace curtains, the old clock ticking in the kitchen, the smell of Robert's aftershave still lingering in the hallway. Gone, all of it. Her eyes drifted back to the phone. A name near the bottom of her contact list caught her breath. Randall Hayes. She hadn't seen that name in 40 years. He'd been her first love, the boy with a crooked smile and amber eyes, who once carved their initials into an oak tree behind the high school. She'd married Robert, and Randall had moved to another state. But somehow, his number had followed her through decades and new phones. Grace stared at it, thumb hovering. The screen dimmed again. She tapped it awake. The tiny battery icon glowed red, threatening to die. Should I? She whispered to herself. The empty diner offered no answer. Outside, a truck rumbled past, its headlights flashing over the window, illuminating her weary face for just a moment. Then, she pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, and on the third ring, a man's voice answered, warm and disbelieving. Grace, is that really you? For a heartbeat, Grace couldn't speak. The voice on the other end, deep, familiar, impossibly real, wrapped around her like a memory that had been waiting in the dark. Grace, Randall said again, quieter this time, as though afraid she might vanish if he spoke too loud. Her lips trembled. Yes, it's me. I didn't think you'd still have the same number. A soft laugh drifted through the cracked phone speaker, carrying years of warmth she'd forgotten existed. I haven't changed it in decades. Never saw a reason to. He paused. You sound shaken. What's happened? The words spilled out before she could stop them. The fire. The smoke. The couch that never became a bed. David's uncertain eyes. Victoria's whisper that sliced through her like a blade. She told it all in fragments, her voice shaking, her fingers tracing circles on the cold diner table. Randall didn't interrupt. Only a quiet breath now and then, as if keeping time with her pain. When she finished, silence stretched between them, the soft kind, the kind that holds understanding. Grace, he said finally, you shouldn't be alone right now. I'll manage, she murmured. I always do. No, he said, firm but kind. You won't. You'll come here. You'll stay with me. My guest room's been empty for years, and my coffee still tastes terrible. Someone ought to fix that. Her laugh came out small and wet. I can't impose. Please, he interrupted gently. Let an old friend do one good thing. The diner lights flickered once. The sky beyond the window was beginning to soften, that fragile blue that comes just before dawn. Steam from her coffee clouded the glass, blurring the neon reflection into pale gold. Randall, she whispered. Are you sure? I've been sure of you since 1978, he said, and she heard the smile in his voice. Something inside her cracked open, not from breaking, but from release. She wiped her eyes, nodding to no one. All right, she whispered. I'll come. The phone beeped, the battery nearly dead. She ended the call before it failed completely. Outside, the first light of morning crept across the empty street. Grace stood, leaving a few crumpled bills under her mug, and walked into the new day. By sunrise, she was at the bus station, ticket in hand, heart pounding, heading toward a town she hadn't seen in 40 years. The bus hissed to a stop in front of a small town that looked almost frozen in time. Grace stepped down, suitcase in hand, and breathed in the scent of morning, pine dew, and the faint sweetness of bread from a nearby bakery. Her heart thudded as she scanned the quiet street. Then she saw him. Randall stood beside an old pickup truck, leaning on the door like he had all the patience in the world. His hair, once dark, was now silvered at the temples. But his eyes, those amber eyes, still held the same steady light she remembered from when they were 17. Grace. He said her name like it was something sacred. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then he crossed the distance and wrapped her in a careful embrace, one that carried both warmth and the weight of years lost. She could smell cedar and coffee on him, familiar and grounding. You haven't changed much, he teased softly, stepping back. I've changed plenty, she smiled. I just did it quietly. They drove to his house, a modest white cottage on a hill, with ivy crawling along the porch rails and a wooden swing that creaked softly in the breeze. Inside, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, scattering gold across old furniture and photographs. On the mantel, Grace froze. There, in a small silver frame, was her high school picture. Her laugh caught in her throat. You kept this. Randall shrugged, eyes gentle. Some things don't burn out. They spent the afternoon talking. Stories spilled easily, his years running a hardware store, her days teaching, the quiet ache of losing Robert. Every word felt like rebuilding a bridge they'd once abandoned. At one point, He poured coffee into two mismatched mugs and set one beside her. Their fingers brushed, a brief, electric contact that said more than words could. The porch swing creaked as they sat together, watching sunlight dip into orange. The world felt slower here, softer, safer. Grace turned to him. "You never married?" He shook his head, eyes on the horizon. "No. Why not?" He smiled faintly, voice low, tender. "Because I was waiting for peace." And for the first time in a long time, Grace felt that maybe, just maybe, she'd found hers too. In the weeks that followed, Grace began to breathe again. Her mornings started with coffee on the porch beside Randall, the air thick with birdsong and the smell of wet grass. They spoke of ordinary things, grocery lists, the stubborn weeds in the garden, and for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel lonely. But peace in a small town is as fragile as glass. One story, once whispered, can crack it without warning. It began at the bakery. Grace had gone in for bread and left with glances instead. The cashier, kind but curious, asked too softly, "You're the lady from the paper, aren't you?" Grace blinked. Paper. That afternoon, Randall brought it to her. The headline was small but cruelly neat. "Local widow loses home in fire, estranged from family." Beneath it, a photo of her house, blackened to its bones. The story mentioned no names, but the internet filled in the blanks. Someone had posted a screenshot of a comment thread, a woman saying, "Asterisk her son lives in Brookhaven, fancy neighborhood. Wouldn't take her in." Asterisk. The word spread faster than flame. Grace folded the paper carefully, as though gentleness could erase the sting. "People always need a villain," she murmured. Randall's jaw tightened. "Then let them make me one instead." She looked up, startled. He smiled, eyes kind but fierce. "If anyone asks, I found you. I helped. Let them talk about that instead." Still, the whispers came, in grocery aisles, in church pews, on sidewalks where the same three people always swept the same leaves. Grace pretended not to hear. But at night, lying awake, she could almost feel the eyes on her, the weight of judgment pressing through the walls. In another city, miles away, David sat on his couch staring at his phone. A friend had sent him the article. The headline made his stomach twist. The comments made it worse. How could someone do that to their own mother? He shut off the screen, but the words stayed. Victoria came in, asking something about dinner. He didn't answer. His chest felt tight, full of all the things he hadn't said that night on the doorstep. Finally he stood, grabbed his keys, and said quietly, "I'm going to see her." And before Victoria could stop him, the door closed behind him. The day David arrived was painted in gold and wind. Autumn leaves tumbled down the hill, catching sunlight like sparks before settling quietly at Grace's feet. She was sweeping the porch when she saw the car slow at the end of the drive, sleek, unfamiliar against the gravel road. Her heart stuttered. For a moment, she thought it might be another curious neighbor, but then the door opened, and her son stepped out. He looked smaller somehow. Not in height, but in certainty. The city polish seemed thinner under the rural light. "Mom!" His voice broke the stillness. Grace leaned on the broom. "David!" For a few seconds, neither moved. Only the rustle of leaves between them. Finally, he walked forward, stopping at the first porch step. His eyes darted toward the house, toward the window where Randall's shadow shifted briefly inside. "I saw the article," he said. "And the comments. They were awful." Grace nodded, quiet. "People will always talk. I shouldn't have let you leave that night." His voice cracked on the word shouldn't. "Victoria," she panicked, "but I should have stood up. I should have stopped her." Grace asked gently. "Or stopped yourself from agreeing with her?" He froze, swallowing hard. The air between them thickened. "I was scared," he admitted. "Of the fight. Of making things worse." Grace nodded again, slower this time. "Fear makes cowards of good men." He looked down. His hands trembled slightly. "Can you ever forgive me?" She gestured toward the porch table. "Sit." They drank coffee together, the steam curling into the crisp air. Randall had quietly placed 2 mugs before retreating inside. The silence held, heavy but not cruel. Grace finally said, "I knocked on your door once, David." She looked at him, eyes soft but steady. "Now you're knocking on mine." His breath hitched. He set the cup down with shaking fingers. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't deserve your kindness." "No," she said, "but you need it." He broke then, the quiet, choked kind of crying that comes from guilt long carried. She reached across, laid her hand over his. No anger, just release. When he finally stood to leave, the wind had stilled. Grace watched his car disappear down the road, then turned and closed the door behind her. This time, the sound felt like peace, not loss. Spring came softly that year, the kind that didn't announce itself with thunder or bloom, but with gentle mornings and air that smelled of new beginnings. Grace stood beside Randall, the field stretching wide before them, and pointed toward the edge of the hill. "There," she said. "That's where I want the porch. I want to see the sunrise every day." Randall smiled, pencil tucked behind his ear, blueprint smudged with soil. "Then that's where it'll be." The house grew slowly, plank by plank, laughter between hammer strikes. Grace learned the rhythm of work again, steady, purposeful. She painted the shutters soft blue, planted marigolds along the path, and watched the earth accept her effort without judgment. Each morning began with the scent of wet soil and sawdust. Each evening ended with her and Randall sitting on the half-finished porch, coffee mugs warm in their hands, talking about everything they'd lost and everything they'd found. "I used to think I'd never start over," she said once, watching the sky turn honeygold. Randall chuckled. "Starting over isn't the same as beginning again. You're building on what survived." His words settled in her heart like sunlight. By summer, the little white house stood complete. It wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled of fresh paint, windows that opened wide to the wind, but it was hers. Grace filled it with soft colors and simple joys. Books stacked on the nightstand, fresh flowers in chipped vases, old music humming from a small radio. She began volunteering at the local library, shelving books and reading stories to children who loved her gentle voice. People in town stopped whispering her name with pity. Now, they said it with affection. One morning, she found Randall repairing the porch swing while the breeze carried the scent of lilac. A small envelope rested on the step, crisp white, her name written in familiar handwriting. Grace opened it carefully. Inside was a wedding invitation, gold lettering shimmering in the sunlight. "David and Victoria invite you to celebrate the marriage of their son." She stood there for a long while, letter trembling slightly in her hand. Randall looked up. "You'll go, won't you?" Grace smiled, a quiet certainty in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "It's time to show them who I became after the fire." The church shimmered with candlelight, soft music drifting through the air like a memory. Grace stood near the back, her pale blue dress simple yet elegant, the same color as the shutters on her new home. The faint scent of roses and polished wood surrounded her, grounding her against the swirl of whispers that followed her arrival. David saw her first. His face changed, surprise, guilt, and then relief, all in a single breath. He moved through the small crowd, leaving Victoria mid-conversation. "Mom," he said softly. "David." She smiled, steady and calm. "You look handsome. You always did on big days." He hesitated, then hugged her tightly, the way he hadn't since he was a boy. For a moment, she felt the weight of all the lost years press between them, and then lift. When they parted, Victoria approached. Her eyes darted everywhere but Grace's. "Thank you for coming," she murmured, polite and cold, the way people speak when unsure which version of themselves to show. Grace only nodded. "It's a lovely wedding. No anger. No bitterness. Only peace." She sat quietly during the ceremony, watching her grandson exchange vows. The joy in his face reminded her that some branches still grow straight even when the roots are cracked. When applause filled the hall, Grace joined in, not for appearances, but from a genuine place of love finally unburdened. Later, as guests danced beneath strings of warm lights, she slipped outside. The night was cool, music floating faintly from the open doors. She tilted her head toward the stars and breathed in the stillness. Randall's car headlights appeared at the end of the lane. He waved as he parked, stepping out with that easy smile she had come to trust. "I figured you'd want a ride home," he said. "I always do," she answered, smiling back. They drove in silence, comfortable and full. When they reached the porch, the house glowed softly under the moon. Grace sat down on the swing, feeling the boards creak beneath her. Solid, real, hers. She looked out toward the dark horizon and whispered, "Everything burned down, so I could start again." Randall squeezed her hand, saying nothing. And in that quiet, Grace finally understood. Sometimes what breaks your heart isn't the end. It's the door to your real beginning.